just forgetting something. I just realized what I was missing. So I want to talk about it. If you didn't watch the first video, I'm going to put the link in the description. Go watch the first video so you understand this one. But I'm going to explain what I forgot about it. So there is a difference between using the class component and the functional component. And the difference here, now I don't know for sure why there is this difference, but I know that there is. So the difference is that when you use the class component to render the children using the custom React reconciler, it's gonna automatically trigger the component mount and unmount of the stage. And I think it might be because here you're specifying the parent component with the this keyword, which allows you to have access to the class, which is the stage that is going to have the mount node as is its children. So this might be the difference. I'm not really sure if it is or it isn't. You can't do that on the functional component because this is going to be undefined. So you can't pass as the parent component inside of this function here. But when you do it with the functional component, it doesn't automatically trigger the mounting and unmounting of the children if you change the values inside of the children that rely on the context, unless you specify inside of the use effect as a dependency. If you specify the children here, then it does trigger the mounting and unmounting of the components. But in both cases, it's the same problem, is that if you put the dependency here, or in the normal circumstance when the class component is going to trigger the mounting and unmounting of the parent, and when it triggers when you change the value of the children, it's going to trigger the mounting and unmounting of the parent. And once that happens, then when the parent unmounts, because you're changing the value of the context provider, which is in this case is the app, is going to make it so that the children don't have access to the app, to the value when it gets time for them to unmount. So this, I can highlight on this simple example here. What happens is that if you, here I have the render dependency, let me remove. So when I don't have the dependency here, what's going to happen is that the first time that React is rendering is going to render the context provider first, and it's going to initialize these values here, and then it's going to put the value inside of the context provider. So that's the reason why here it doesn't show parent mounted first, because it doesn't run the use effect. It just runs the rendering part of the cycle, which is this part of the function here. And then inside of the use effect, I'm assuming it just sets up callback functions to update the facts later. So the first time it runs the function for the parent, but then it doesn't run the facts right away. It just sets up callback functions to run the facts later. Then it mounts the children. And you can see here on the console log, then initializes the value for the children of the context. Then it mounts the parent, and then unmounts the child, then unmounts the parent, then mounts the children, mounts the parent again. So that's the cycle. And if I click here, it only mounts and unmounts the children. So there isn't a problem because it's not updating the parent components, it's just updating the child, regardless of which one you click. So that makes it so that the value is updated the correct way. But if I want the parent to mount and unmount every time I change the value of the context, then I have to put the value as a dependency here inside of the use effect. But then the issue is that if you do that, if I click here and I change the value, it's going to cause a bunch of mounting and unmounting. And because of that, the parent is going to be unmounted last and on this thing here. And when you do that, it's going to change the value here to 0. So that's going to make it so the value is always 0, regardless of what happens, because the parent is always going to be unmounted last. And then the child is going to be mounted. And when it does, the value is going to be 0 because they're changing here. So that makes it so that the context breaks. So, and this is the issue because I assume that on a normal React application, you would never do the stuff that I'm doing here, which is to put the variable inside of the use effect, because you don't need the context provider to mount and unmount every time the value changes. But what happens on react-pixi is that you do need the value to change, and that's the fundamental difference here, I think, because the whole custom renderer is being rendered inside of the lifecycle of the this parent component, which is the stage. So because of that, you have to re-render the stage component each time that there is a change on the children of the that are being rendered through the custom reconciler here. And that's the main fundamental issue, because if you do it like that, then it's going to trigger the mounting and unmounting of the parent, and that's going to make it so that the value of the app gets destroyed here on this part of the life cycle. And because the children are not being unmounted before the parent, then it breaks up the whole thing. So it's essentially the same thing that is happening here, but the only difference is here I'm setting the value to 0, and it doesn't break the application, but it does break the functionality of the value itself. So I think that's the main fundamental issue. If you're rendering stuff inside of a component using a custom reconciler, then you're gonna have to update the parent component each time there is a change in the children of the custom reconciler. And because you're gonna have to update, you're gonna have to trigger the mounting and unmounting of the parent. And because you have to do that, then you have to figure out a way to unmount the children when you're unmounting the parent, because you want the children to unmount first. So you gotta do a function call or something that I still don't know if it's possible or not. I'm gonna try to figure out. But you gotta do the function call here, and then that way you're gonna unmount the children before, and there isn't gonna be a problem, assuming. But if you don't do that and you just destroy the value of the context when you're unmounting the parent, it's going to break the application. And the reason why you have to render and to mount and unmount the parent is because you have to update the custom reconciler each time there is a change on the children, and React is not going to automatically do that. And this is just the normal way that React works, and you can see that when you remove the value here on the parent and you click here. It's just mounting and unmounting the children. It's not gonna do anything with the parent because there isn't a change in the state of the parent, I think. So that's the main issue. Hopefully this is clear. If it isn't, then just let me know in the comments and I'll try to make other videos explaining. So yeah, and go watch the first one to understand this one. So